The public is conditioned to watch the skies for missiles. This is a strategic misdirection. The kinetic cost of a peer-to-peer exchange is an obsolete metric. The primary vector of modern warfare is not a projectile. It is absolute, systemic silence. The twin pillars of American power, economic solvency, and military projection are eroding simultaneously. The Federal Reserve's balance sheet has created a systemic liability, a crisis of confidence waiting for a trigger. This is the vulnerability. The logical accelerant is not a fleet. It is an asymmetric attack on the digital nervous system. While you focus on conventional hardware, the true targets are the undersea fiber optic cables that carry 99% of global data and financial transactions. Severing these is not war. It is turning off the lights on an empire. Simultaneously, satellite blinding or dazzling removes the eyes. A congressional report confirms the deactivation of assets like the Army's attack helicopter squadron in South Korea. The conventional footprint shrinks while the strategic dependence on orbital assets grows. This is the blueprint for paralysis. This creates the blind Leviathan, a global superpower, fiscally compromised and sensor-deprived, yet possessing terminal military power. Unable to see or transact, its only protocol to re-establish dominance is a disproportionate, kinetic response. This makes escalation a mathematical certainty, not a political debate. An unpopular, protracted war is the fastest vector to internal collapse. It is not a political event. It is a solvency crisis expressed through kinetic action. Analysts at CSIS confirm this blueprint. For a state like Russia, a conventional war becomes a catastrophic domestic liability, draining political capital faster than it depletes ammunition reserves. The objective is not victory abroad, but survival at home. This is not a theoretical model. This is operational reality. The document is public. Reports from Iran confirm widespread protests and strikes, a direct consequence of inflation and currency devaluation. This is the mechanism. External economic pressure creates internal fractures, forcing the regime's hand. When a state's currency is collapsing and its populace is in the streets, its capacity for symmetric, high-cost warfare is zero. A leadership facing this type of systemic liability cannot afford a dollar-for-dollar kinetic exchange with the United States. The math does not permit it. The high cost of conventional platforms is a guaranteed vector to bankruptcy and internal regime change. Therefore, weakness forces a pivot. It creates a mathematical incentive to abandon conventional parity and embrace low-cost, asymmetric attacks. These are not random acts of terror. They are calculated economic transactions designed to inflict disproportionate damage. The goal is to force the superior power into a protocol of high-cost escalation, draining its own solvency to maintain the illusion of dominance. The adversary's weakness is weaponized, creating a trap from which there is no low-cost exit. The central mechanism driving this liability is the economics of lethality. A report from the Royal United Services Institute, or RUSI, quantifies the new battle space calculus. The cost to destroy a $5 million main battle tank is now approximately $500. This is not a balanced exchange. It is a systemic economic drain engineered to bankrupt a superpower. This radical cost inversion represents the democratization of violence. The capacity for precise kinetic attacks once the exclusive domain of nation-states with trillion-dollar budgets, has been decentralized. It is now available to non-state actors and second-tier powers for the price of consumer electronics. The result is a devastatingly asymmetric cost imposition strategy. An adversary can deploy thousands of threats, risking negligible capital, while forcing the United States to expend high-value assets and munitions in response. Each exchange depletes U.S. inventory and fiscal solvency, regardless of the tactical outcome. The U.S. Army's recent deactivation of an attack helicopter squadron in South Korea is not a strategic pivot. It's a quiet admission of this unsustainable economic reality. This blueprint incentivizes a constant barrage of low-cost provocations designed to force a high-cost response. To maintain the illusion of dominance, the U.S. is locked into a protocol of disproportionate escalation. The math dictates that when conventional responses become too expensive, the only remaining leverage is the threat of strategic nuclear-level force. This is not a political choice. It is the terminal phase of a solvency crisis. The global battle space is no longer defined by carrier groups and tank divisions. The primary vector for strategic attack is now the gray zone. Politically unstable regions weaponized into proxy laboratories. These are not the cause of conflict. They are the staging grounds. While legacy media focuses on regional drama, they are missing the blueprint. They are watching the symptom, not the systemic infection. The math doesn't lie. According to a recent congressional report, the U.S. Army deactivated an entire attack helicopter squadron in South Korea. The 5th Air Cavalry Squadron was removed from Camp Humphreys. This is not a transformation effort. It is a calculated retreat. It is the physical manifestation of a nation that can no longer afford its kinetic footprint. Every dollar printed to service debt is a dollar that cannot field a squadron. This retreat creates a vacuum, and adversaries are exploiting it with asymmetric leverage. Reports from Iran confirm widespread protests and strikes, directly linked to inflation and currency devaluation. For an adversary, financing this level of internal disruption is a rounding error. For the U.S., a conventional military response is now economically prohibitive. The gray zone turns our solvency crisis into their primary weapon. This forces the U.S. into a zero-sum protocol. Consider the scenario of a Venezuelan operation, as analyzed by MarketWatch. Such a kinetic event would directly accelerate the domestic affordability crisis. It is a strategic trap. The Federal Reserve's dubious history, as documented by financial outlets, has preloaded this liability into the system. Every foreign entanglement now has a direct negative impact on American domestic liquidity. CSIS and RUSI analysts have modeled this protocol. Adversaries will continue to stage low-cost, high-impact events in gray zones, leveraging existing instability like that flagged in South Africa or even Canada as future testbeds. The objective is to force an American response. With a degraded conventional force and a terminal solvency crisis, the only remaining response is disproportionate escalation. This isn't a political choice. It is a mathematical certainty, a launch-on-warning posture driven by economics, not ideology. The protocol is designated launch-on-warning. It is a Cold War relic repurposed for modern deterrence. The logic is a zero-sum calculation. If sensor networks detect an inbound strategic launch from an adversary, the U.S. must launch its own arsenal before those incoming warheads can neutralize its command structure and missile silos. The entire decision cycle is under 15 minutes. This protocol is now the primary systemic liability. An adversary no longer needs to risk a kinetic first strike. CSIS reports confirm that a sophisticated cyber attack can blind the space-based infrared system or the ground-based radar network. This creates a sensor blackout. This is the fog of digital war. For the commander in the bunker, the screen going black is indistinguishable from a successful decapitation strike already in progress. Waiting for confirmation means risking total annihilation. The protocol forces a choice based on the absence of data. Fear becomes the trigger. A low-cost, asymmetric cyber vector forces a high-cost, irreversible kinetic response. The decision to launch ceases to be a political choice. It becomes a mathematical probability based on a pre-programmed protocol reacting to weaponized uncertainty. The blueprint is now active. U.S. force posture is retracting. The deactivation of the Army's 5th Air Cavalry Squadron in South Korea is not a budgetary decision. It is a systemic signal of reduced kinetic overwatch. This withdrawal creates a vacuum, a calculated liability that adversaries are mandated to exploit. Simultaneously, the U.S. economic architecture exhibits critical failure points. The Federal Reserve's actions have already engineered what AOL.com terms a crisis of confidence. This is not an opinion, it is a solvency vector. Internal economic fragility becomes the primary target for any rational state actor seeking leverage against a peer competitor. Adversary states facing their own internal pressures, such as the inflation-driven protests in Iran, operate on a different cost-benefit analysis. They cannot match U.S. kinetic expenditure. Therefore, they are incentivized toward the asymmetric. The objective is not to defeat the U.S. military, but to trigger a disproportionate, economically ruinous response. Expect the calibration shot within 12 months. The target will not be military. It will be economic. A logic bomb, untraceable, will be deployed against the logistics and crane operating software of a primary West Coast container port, likely Los Angeles or Long Beach. The resulting paralysis will be attributed to a system glitch. It is a test to see if the U.S. will launch a kinetic response to a non-kinetic attack during a solvency crisis. The math is not in its favor.